Sacagawea.
Sakakawea, also Sakakawea or Sacajawea, was a Lemhi Shoshone woman, who accompanied the Lewis and Clark expedition, acting as an interpreter and guide, in their exploration of the western United States. She traveled thousands of miles from North Dakota to the Pacific Ocean between 1804 and 1806.
Cultural significance.
She has become an important part of the Lewis and Clark legend in the American public imagination. The National American Woman Suffrage Association of the early 20th century adopted her as a symbol of women's worth and independence, erecting several statues and plaques in her memory, and doing much to spread the story of her accomplishments. In 2000, the United States Mint issued the Sacagawea dollar coin in her honor, depicting Sacagawea and her son, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. The face on the coin was modeled on a modern Shoshone Bannock woman named Randiel Hidao Tetkan. No contemporary image of Sacagawea exists. In 2001, she was given the title of Honorary Sergeant, Regular Army, by then-President Bill Clinton.
Biography. Early life.
Reliable historical information about Sakakawea is very limited. She was born into an Agidika, Samanita, tribe of Lemhi Shoshone between Kenny Creek and Agency Creek about 20 minutes away from present-day Salmon in Lemhi County, Idaho. In 1800, when she was about 12, she and several other girls were kidnapped by a group of Haiditsa, also known as Mintarees, in a battle that resulted in the death among the Shoshone of 4 men, 4 women and several boys. She was taken as a captive to a Haiditsa village near present-day Washburn, North Dakota. At about 13 years of age, Sakakawea was taken as a wife by Toussaint Charbonneau, a Quebecer trapper living in the village. He had also taken another young Shoshone named Otter woman as a wife. Charbonneau was reported to have purchased both wives from the Haiditsa, or one Sakakawea while gambling.
The Lewis and Clark expedition.
Sakakawea was pregnant with her first child when the Corps of Discovery arrived near the Haiditsa villages to spend the winter of 1804-05. Captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark built Fort Mandan. They interviewed several trappers who might be able to interpret or guide the expedition up the Missouri River in the springtime. They agreed to hire Charbonneau as an interpreter when they discovered his wife spoke Shoshone, as they knew they would need the help of Shoshone tribes at the headwaters of the Missouri. Clark recorded in his journal on November 4, 1804. Charbonneau and Sakakawea moved into the expedition's fort a week later. Clark nicknamed her Janie. Lewis recorded the birth of Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau on February 11, 1805, noting that another of the party's interpreters administered crushed rattlesnake rattles to speed the delivery. Clark and other European Americans nicknamed the boy Little Pomp, or Pompey. In April, the expedition left Fort Mandan and headed up the Missouri River in pirogues. They had to be poled against the current and sometimes pulled from the river banks. On May 14, 1805, Sakakawea rescued items that had fallen out of a capsized boat, including the journals and records of Lewis and Clark. The Corps commanders, who praised her quick action, named the Sacagawea River in her honor on May 20. By August 1805, the Corps had located a Shoshone tribe and was attempting to trade for horses to cross the Rocky Mountains. They used Sakakawea to interpret and discovered that the tribe's chief was her brother Kamihuate. Lewis recorded their reunion in his journal, and Clark in his. The Shoshone agreed to barter horses to the group, and to provide guides to lead them over the cold and barren Rocky Mountains. The trip was so hard that they were reduced to eating tallow candles to survive. When they descended into the more temperate regions on the other side, Sakakawea helped to find and cook Kama's roots to help them regain their strength. As the expedition approached the mouth of the Columbia River on the Pacific coast, Sakakawea gave up her beaded belt to enable the captains to trade for a fur robe they wished to give to President Thomas Jefferson. Clark's journal entry for November 20, 1805 reads: When the Corps reached the Pacific Ocean, all members of the expedition, including Sacagawea and Clark's black manservant York, voted on November 24 on the location for building their winter fort. In January, when a whale's carcass washed up onto the beach south of Fort Clatsop, Sacagawea insisted on her right to go see this monstrous fish. On the return trip, they approached the Rocky Mountains in July 1806. On July 6, Clark recorded, "The Indian woman informed me that she had been in this plain frequently and knew it well. She said we would discover a gap in the mountains in our direction, which is now Gibbons Pass." A week later, on July 13, Sacagawea advised Clark to cross into the Yellowstone River basin at what is now known as Bozeman Pass. This was later chosen as the optimal route for the Northern Pacific Railway to cross the Continental Divide. While Sacagawea has been depicted as a guide for the expedition, she is recorded as providing direction in only a few instances. Her work as an interpreter certainly helped the party to negotiate with the Shoshone. However, her greatest value to the mission may have been simply her presence during the arduous journey, which showed their peaceful intent. While traveling through what is now Franklin County, Washington, Clark noted, "The Indian woman confirmed those people of our friendly intentions, as no woman ever accompanies a war party of Indians in this quarter, and, the wife of Shibono, our interpreter, we find reconciles all the Indians. As to our friendly intentions, a woman with a party of men is a token of peace." As he traveled downriver from Fort Mandan at the end of the journey, Clark wrote to Charbonneau.
Later life and death.
After the expedition, Charbonneau and Sakakawea spent 3 years among the Hidatsa before accepting William Clark's invitation to settle in St. Louis, Missouri in 1809. They entrusted Jean-Baptiste's education to Clark, who enrolled the young man in the St. Louis Academy boarding school. Sakakawea gave birth to a daughter, Lizette, sometime after 1810. According to Bonnie Spirit Windwalker Butterfield, historical documents suggest Sakakawea died in 1812 of an unknown sickness. A few months later, 15 men were killed in an Indian attack on Fort Lisa, then located at the mouth of the Bighorn River. John Luttig and Sacagawea's young daughter were among the survivors. Toussaint Charbonneau was mistakenly thought to have been killed at this time, but he apparently lived to at least 80. He had signed over formal custody of his son to Clark in 1813. As further proof that Sacagawea died in 1812, Butterfield writes, "An adoption document made in the Orphans' Court records in St. Louis, Missouri states, on August 11, 1813, William Clark became the guardian of Toussaint Charbonneau, a boy about 10 years, and Lizette Charbonneau, a girl about 1 year old." For a Missouri state court at the time, to designate a child as orphaned and to allow an adoption, both parents had to be confirmed dead in court papers. The last recorded document citing Sacagawea's existence appears in William Clark's original notes written between 1825 to 1826. He lists the names of each of the expedition members and their last known whereabouts. For Sacagawea he writes, "Sacajawea or dead." Jackson, 1962. There is no later record of Lizette among Clark's papers. It is believed that she died in childhood. Sacagawea's son Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau continued a restless and adventurous life. He carried lifelong celebrity status as the infant who went with the explorers to the Pacific Ocean and back. When he was 18, he was befriended by a German prince, who took him to Europe. There, Jean-Baptiste spent 6 years living among royalty while learning 4 languages and furthering a child in Germany named Anton Fries. After his infant son died, Jean-Baptiste came back from Europe in 1829 to live the life of a Western frontiersman. He became a gold miner, hotel clerk, and in 1846, he led a group of Mormons to California. While in California he became a magistrate for the San Luis Rey Mission. He did not like the way Indians were treated in the missions and left to become a hotel clerk in Auburn, California, once the center of gold rush activity. After working 6 years in Auburn, the restless son of Sacagawea left in search of riches in the gold mines of Montana. He was 61 years old, and the trip was too much for him. He became ill with pneumonia and died in a remote area near Dana, Oregon on May 16, 1866.
In 1884 death?
Some American Indian oral traditions relate that rather than dying in 1812, Sakakawea left her husband Charbonneau, crossed the Great Plains and married into a Comanche tribe. She was said to have returned to the Shoshone in Wyoming, where she died in 1884. The question of Sacagawea's final resting place caught the attention of national suffragists seeking voting rights for women, according to author Raymond Wilson. Wilson argues that Sacagawea became a role model whom suffragettes pointed to with pride. Wilson goes on to note, in 1925, Dr. Charles Eastman, a Dakota Sioux physician, was hired by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to locate Sacagawea's remains. Eastman visited many different Native American tribes to interview elderly individuals who might have known or heard of Sacagawea, and learned of a Shoshone woman at the Wind River Reservation with a Comanche named Poravo, chief woman. Some of the people he interviewed said that she spoke of a long journey where she had helped white men, and that she had a silver Jefferson Peace Medal of the type carried by the Lewis and Clark expedition. He found a Comanche woman called Tacutine who said that Poravo was her grandmother. She had married into a Comanche tribe and had a number of children, including Tacutine's father Ticanaf. Poravo left the tribe after her husband Jerkmeet was killed. According to these narratives, Poravo lived for some time at Fort Bridger in Wyoming with her sons Basil and Baptiste, who each knew several languages, including English and French. Eventually she found her way back to the Lemhi Shoshone at the Wind River Indian Reservation, where she was recorded as Basil's mother. This woman died on April 9, 1884, and a Reverend John Roberts officiated at her funeral. It was Eastman's conclusion that Poravo was Sacagawea. In 1963 a monument to Sacajawea of the Shoshones was erected at Fort Washakie on the Wind River Reservation near Lander, Wyoming on the basis of this claim. The belief that Sacagawea lived to old age and died in Wyoming was widely disseminated in the United States in the 1933 biography Sacajawea by University of Wyoming professor and historian Grace Raymond Hubbard. Hubbard's 30 years of research which led to the biography of the Shoshone woman is called into question by critics. Hubbard presents a stout-hearted woman in her portrayal of Sacajawea that is undeniably long on romance and short on hard evidence, suffering from a sentimentalization of Indian culture. In her novel Sacajawea, 1984, Anna Lee Waldo explored the story of Sacagawea's returning to Wyoming 50 years after her departure. The author was well aware of the historical research supporting an 1812 death, but she chose to explore the oral tradition.
Name.
A long-running controversy has surrounded the correct spelling, pronunciation, and etymology of the woman's name. However, linguists working on Haiditsa since the 1870s have always considered the name's Haiditsa etymology essentially indisputable. The name is a compound of two common Haiditsa nouns, Kegaga bird and Mia woman. The compound is written as Kagulgawa bird woman in modern Haiditsa orthography, and pronounced, /m/ is pronounced between vowels in Haiditsa. The double slash or slash in the name indicates a long vowel and the diacritics a falling pitch pattern. Haiditsa is a pitch accent language that does not have stress, therefore in the Haiditsa pronunciation all syllables in are pronounced with roughly the same relative emphasis. However, most English speakers perceive the accented syllable, the long slash or slash as stressed. In faithful rendering of the name Kagulgawa to other languages, it is advisable to emphasize the second, long syllable, not the last, as is common in English. The name has several spelling traditions in English. The origin of each tradition is described in the following sections.
Sacagawea.
Sacagawea /s at, car, g at we, at / is the most widely used spelling of her name, and is pronounced with a hard G sound, rather than a soft G, or J sound. Lewis and Clark's original journals mention Sacagawea by name 17 times, spelled 8 different ways, each time with a G. Clark used Sakakawea, Sakakawea, Sakagawea and Sakakawea, while Lewis used Sakakawea, Sakakawea, Sacagawea and Sakakawea. The spelling Sacagawea was established in 1910 as the proper usage in government documents by the United States Bureau of American Ethnology, and is the spelling adopted by the United States Mint for use with the dollar coin, as well as the United States Board on Geographic Names and the U.S. National Park Service. The spelling is used by a large number of historical scholars.
Sakakawea.
Sakakawea/s k is the next most widely adopted spelling, and the most often accepted among specialists. Proponents say the name comes from the Haiditsa language Sakakawea, bird woman. Charbonneau told expedition members that his wife's name meant bird woman, and in May 1805 Lewis used the Haiditsa meaning in his journal. Sakakawea is the official spelling of her name according to the three affiliated tribes, which include the Haiditsa, and is widely used throughout North Dakota, where she is considered a state heroine, notably in the naming of Lake Sakakawea, the extensive reservoir of Garrison Dam on the Missouri River. The North Dakota State Historical Society quotes Russell Reed's book Sakakawea, The Bird Woman. However, Irving W. Anderson, president of the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation, argued.
Sacajawea.
The name Sacajawea or Sacajawea/Sakat in contrast to the Haiditsa etymology, is said to be derived from Shoshone Sakazawea, meaning boat puller, or boat launcher. It is the preferred spelling used by the Lemhi Shoshone people, some of whom claim that her Haiditsa captors merely reinterpreted her existing Shoshone name in their own language, and pronounced it in their own dialect. They heard a name that approximated Sakaka, and Ia, and interpreted it as bird woman, substituting the hard GK pronunciation for the softer TZJ sound that did not exist in the Haiditsa language. The usage of this spelling almost certainly originated from the use of the J spelling by Nicholas Biddle, who annotated the Lewis and Clark expeditions journals for publication in 1814. This usage became more widespread with the publication of the 1902 novel The Conquest, The True Story of Lewis and Clark, written by Eva Emery Dye. It is likely Dye used Biddle's secondary source for the spelling, and her highly popular book made it ubiquitous throughout the United States. Previously most non-scholars had never even heard of Sakakawea. Rosanna George, great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Kamihuat, says the Agaidika tribe of Lemhi Shoshone do not recognize the spelling or pronunciation Sakakawea, and schools and other memorials erected in the area surrounding her birthplace use the spelling Sacajawea. Idaho native John Reese explored the boat launcher etymology in a long letter to the United States Commissioner of Indian Affairs written in the 1920s. It was republished in 1970 by the Lemhi County Historical Society as a pamphlet titled Madame Charbonneau, and contains many of the arguments in favor of the Shoshone derivation of the name. The spelling Sacajawea, though widely taught until the late 20th century, is generally considered incorrect in modern academia. Linguistics professor Dr. Sven Lindblad from the Idaho State University in Pocatello has concluded that it is unlikely that Sacajawea is a Shoshone word. The term for boat in Shoshone is Saki, but the rest of the alleged compound would be incomprehensible to a native speaker of Shoshone. The spelling has subsided from general use, although the corresponding soft J pronunciation persists in American culture.
In entertainment. Fiction.
Two early 20th century novels shaped much of the public perception of Sakakawea. The Conquest, The True Story of Lewis and Clark, was written by American suffragist Eva Emery Dye and published in 1902 in anticipation of the expedition's centennial. The National American Woman Suffrage Association embraced her as a female hero, and numerous stories and essays about her appeared in ladies' journals. A few decades later, Sacagawea, 1933, by Grace Hubbard was published to even greater success. Sacagawea has since become a popular figure in historical and young adult novels, including the long 1984 novel Sacajawea by Anna Lee Waldo. Some fictional accounts of the expedition speculate that Sacagawea was romantically involved with Lewis or Clark during their expedition. While the journals show that she was friendly with Clark and would often do favors for him, the idea of a romantic liaison was created by novelists who wrote about the expedition much later. This fiction was perpetuated in the 1955 Western film The Far Horizons.
Film.
Several movies, both documentaries and fiction, have been made about Sacagawea. Night at the Museum 2, Battle of the Smithsonian, 2009, played by Mizuho Peck, The Spirit of Sacagawea, 2007, Night at the Museum, 2006, played by Mizuho Peck, Bill and Merowita's Excellent Adventure, 2006, played by Crystal Leeson, Journey of Sakakawea, 2004, Jefferson's West, 2003, played by Cedar Henry, Lewis and Clark, Great Journey West, 2002, played by Alex Rice, The Far Horizons, 1955, played by Donna Reed.
Music.
Sacagawea is referenced in the Stevie Wonder song Black Man, from the album Songs in the Key of Life. In the Piano Concerto No. 2 after Lewis and Clark, by Philip Glass, the second movement is titled Sacagawea. Sakakawea was mentioned in the Schoolhouse Rock song Elbow Room as the guide for Lewis and Clark.
Memorials.
Sacagawea River in Montana, Lake Sakakawea in North Dakota, USS Sacagawea, one of several United States ships named in her honor, Sacagawea Dollar, Mount Sacagawea, Eastman County, Wyoming, and the associated Sacagawea Glacier, Sacajawea Peak, Wallowa County, Oregon, Sacagawea Peak, Gallatin County, Montana, Sacagawea Peak, Custer County, Idaho, Sacajawea Portera, a caldera on the planet Venus.
The Sacagawea Center.
The Sacajawea Interpretive, Cultural, and Educational Center is a 71-acre, 290,000 m2, park located in Salmon, Idaho by the rivers and mountains of Sacagawea's homeland. It is owned and operated by the City of Salmon, in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management, Idaho Governor's Lewis and Clark Trail Committee, Salmon Valley National Forest, Idaho Department of Fish and Game, and numerous non-profit and volunteer organizations.
In sculpture.
Astoria, Oregon, at Untitled Landing in Lewis and Clark National Historical Park, bronze statue of Sakakawea and Jean-Baptiste, Bismarck, North Dakota, by Leonard Krunel, 1910, with baby pomp, on the grounds of the North Dakota State Capitol. In 2003, a replica was given to the National Statuary Hall collection in the United States Capitol Visitor Center, Boise, Idaho, installed in front of the Idaho History Museum in July 2003. Charlottesville, Virginia, by Charles Keck, 1919, a statue of Merowita Lewis, William Clark and Sacagawea, Cheney, Washington, by Harold Barlows, 1960, a statue of Sacagawea is displayed in the Rose Garden in front of the President's House at Eastern Washington University, Cody, Wyoming, by Harry Jackson, 1980, painted bronze, 114 inches. The statue is located in the Griever Cashman Garden at the Buffalo Bill Historical Center, Cody, Wyoming, by Richard V. Greaves, 2005, bronze, 72 inches. The sculpture is in the Robbie Powwow Garden at the Buffalo Bill Historical Center, Fort Benton, Montana, by Robert Scriver, a sculpture of Sakakawea and her baby, and Captains Lewis and Clark, in the Riverside Sculpture Park, Fort Worth, Texas, by Glenna Goodacre, 2001, Sacagawea statue outside the National Cowgirl Hall of Fame, Godfrey, Illinois, by Glenna Goodacre, at Lewis and Clark Community College. By the same artist who designed the image on the Sacagawea dollar, Great Falls, Montana, by Robert Scriver, bronze 3/4 scale statue of Sacagawea, her baby Jean-Baptiste, Lewis, Clark, and the Newfoundland dog Seaman, at the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail Interpretive Center in Great Falls, Montana, Kansas City, Missouri, by Eugene L. Daub, 2000, Corps of Discovery monument including life-size figures of Sakakawea and Jean-Baptiste, York, and Seaman on the bluff at Clarks Point Overlook, Case Park, Quality Hill, Lander, Wyoming, in local cemetery. 14 miles west on US 287 and then 2 miles west, after a turn. Turn off about 3 miles south of Fort Washakie. There is a tall statue of Sakakawea, 6 feet, with tombstones downhill of her, husband, and 2 children. There is also a monument on site, Lewiston, Idaho, multiple statues, including one along the main approach to the city, Longview, Washington. A statue of Sakakawea and Jean-Baptiste was placed in Lake Sacajawea Park near the Hemlock Street Footbridge in 2005, Portland, Oregon, by Alice Cooper, 1905. Sacagawea and Jean-Baptiste was unveiled July 6, 1905 and moved to Washington Park, April 6, 1906, Portland, Oregon, by Glenna Goodacre, at Lewis and Clark College, permanently installed on September 5, 2004, St. Louis, Missouri, by Harry Weber, 2002. A statue of Sakakawea with her baby in a cradle board is included in the diorama of the Lewis and Clark expedition that is on display in the lobby of the St. Louis Drury Plaza Hotel, located in the historical International Fair Exchange